Happy New Year! Well, almost. It's been another troubling year with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic not making anything better. Despite that, though, we've had an amazing year in spaceflight. So far, we've had more than 130 launches, with only 9 of them being unsuccessful as of December 21st. These include new vehicle debuts, a slew of new achievements and records, and even a few surprises here and there. But there's 365 days in a year, so it's a little mind-boggling to go back and find the significant spaceflight events that occurred. So I'll be highlighting them for you. We'll be looking at some of the most significant launches of the year, along with some new information that blew my mind away, and maybe yours as well. Let's get to it. You can't have a year in spaceflight without mentioning SpaceX. They have had a record-breaking 31 launches this year, a full 5 extra launches compared to their 26 in 2020. Most of these launches were for the company's satellite internet service called Starlink. The internet service relies on a mega constellation of satellites orbiting the Earth at an operational altitude of about 550 kilometers. At this altitude, Starlink is able to provide decent speeds with a lower latency due to its lower altitude compared to past satellite internet providers. The 550-kilometer altitude also allows for Earth's gravity to naturally pull on the satellites back to Earth after a few years, mitigating orbital debris. Now, if you're wondering how Starlink and other satellites impact our oceans, go check out my video on how rocket debris affects our oceans, linked here, or down in the description. Oh, and while you're at it, make sure to go subscribe. YouTube tells me only 8.9% of you guys are subscribed. It's free, and it really helps out the channel. In order for these Starlink satellites to get to orbit, they need a reliable and cost-effective rocket to launch them. This is where SpaceX's venerable Falcon 9 takes the spotlight. With new first-stage boosters rarely being seen this year and a whole slew of Starlink launches, the Falcon 9 booster fleet reached some incredible milestones, all of which were truly spectacular. In mid-January, booster B1051 was rolled out to Launch Complex 39A after a 38-day turnaround, the fastest booster turnaround time in the company's history. A few months later, on May 9th, the same booster flew for the record-breaking 10th time, successfully reaching the company's goal of 10 booster flights without major refurbishment, and just this month, B1051 flew for the record-breaking 11th time out of Vandenberg Space Force Base for the last Starlink mission of the year. Another booster, B1049, also flew its 10th mission this year. Another major milestone for the Falcon 9 fleet was the approval to launch crew on flight-proven boosters. For the Crew 2 mission, the astronauts flew aboard booster 1061, which supported the Crew 1 mission prior to the launch. Fairing recovery was also a major hotspot for SpaceX this year as well. Both methods of fairing recovery were used throughout 2021, which were the scooping of fairings out of the water after a controlled splashdown by fast recovery vessels, or the more interesting but less feasible method of catching the fairings in a net while it falls under a parachute. The latter method was ultimately pushed aside as the company moved towards a fast recovery method of the fairings after they splashed down, which meant the 2 ships carrying nets to catch these fairings were forced into retirement. Probably one of the more notable spaceflight events that happened this year is the development of Starship in South Texas. Starting in late December of 2020, Starship suborbital flights were conducted to validate the design of the ship before its orbital flight sometime next year. All of these suborbital flights were, rather interesting to watch, or how should I say, explosive. All of the tests finally culminated on May 5th, with serial number 15 made the first successful landing and recovery. As a note, SN-10 did land 2 months prior to SN-15's flight, but it did not have a successful recovery process since it exploded minutes after landing, making the quickest turnaround time for a Starship ever. It was just a rather explosive one. Super Heavy also made its debut this year, with the first prototype called BN1 being finished in March. According to SpaceX CEO Elon Musk, BN1 was a production pathfinder, with BN2 being under pad in April with engines for testing. However, BN2 was never fully assembled, and BN 2.1 being built as a test tank instead. The next full-scale Super Heavy was BN 3. This booster was rolled out to the pad and conducted the first static fire using the Super Heavy system, and isn't going to be used for the first orbital flight test. This task follows to Booster 4, with its complement of 29 Raptor engines. As a note, further testing beyond a cryogenic proof test has been conducted on Booster 4 as of December 21st. I'll dive more into Starship on a future video that I still haven't gotten to work on yet, so please stay tuned for that. I promise the wait will be worth it. Of course, both the Super Heavy booster and ship will be reusable, which reminds me of the other reusability events that happened this year, and boy, were they interesting to hear. There's no doubt about it. Reusability is becoming the new norm in spaceflight, and we've seen plenty of that this year in other companies other than SpaceX. Rocket Lab announced their new partially reusable medium-lift launch vehicle called Neutron on March 1st. Early renders showed a Falcon 9-like look, but that was all the news we got for most of the year. Finally, on December 2nd, Rocket Lab CEO Peter Beck led an announcement that detailed a major update on Neutron. The rocket would be made of Rocket Lab's own carbon composite, and a big emphasis was placed on how the company strayed away from stainless steel.
Oh, that sounds so good.
Other interesting announcements included the idea of an opening four-way fairing that is attached to the first stage and a fixed landing leg structure. This new fairing idea is currently being toyed around, with CEO Peter Beck saying that they will decide between a two-way fairing opening or a four-way fairing opening by the end of the year. Another small sat launch provider is also getting on board with reusability. Virgin Orbit is a unique launch provider, as their Launcher 1 rocket is launched from the underside of a modified Boeing 747. According to an infographic provided by the company, Launcher 2 will be partially reusable, with a similar landing to Rocket Lab's Electron rocket as it splashes down on the ocean via a parachute. 2021 has had a slew of human spaceflight activities. Soyuz MS-18 kicked the year off on April 9th, sending Russian cosmonauts Oleg Novinsky, Peter Duruv, and NASA astronaut Mark Van der Heij to the International Space Station. I am incredibly sorry if I butcher any names. Crew 2 followed suit in late April as NASA astronaut Shane Kimbrough, Megan McArthur, ESA astronaut Thomas Pesquet, and JAXA astronaut Akihito Hoshide launched aboard a Crew Dragon called Endeavour, the same Dragon that flew the Demo 2 mission a year earlier. More ISS launches were conducted later into the year, but the real highlight of human spaceflight this year were the private tourist launches. This year, Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin finally sent up their first operational crewed flights. Virgin Galactic beat Blue Origin by mere days when it launched Spaceship Two with its crew including the company's CEO, Richard Branson. Blue Origin followed suit on July 20th, sending CEO Jeff Bezos and his brother Mark, 18-year-old Oliver Damon, and Wally Funk, one of the Mercury 13, up into space. Throughout the rest of the year, Blue Origin conducted two more crewed tourist flights, dubbed NS-18 and NS-19. The Star Trek icon, William Shatner, flew on NS-18, and his reaction and experience was just incredible.
No description can equal this weightlessness.
This is nuts!
Oh my God.
Unfortunately, another NS-18 crew member, Glenn DeVries, passed away a little less than a month later on November 11th, when a Cessna he was piloting in New Jersey crashed under unknown circumstances. NS-19 would lift dampened spirits with the first fully crewed flight above the Kármán line. Some of the crew included GMA host Michael Strahan and Laura Shepard Churchley. Does the name sound familiar? 60 years after Al Shepard's historic flight, his daughter got the chance to go up to space. But let's be honest here. There is one human spaceflight event that just blew us away this year, and that is Inspiration 4. Inspiration 4 was an orbital tourist mission when Shift 4 Payments CEO Jared Isaacman decided to fulfill a daredevil act of going to space. He partnered with Spaceflight X to use their Crew Dragon as his method of going to space and allowed 3 other people to join him, who ultimately were Haley Arsenault, Chris Zambrowski, and Dr. Cyan Proctor. Of course, the privately funded mission was paid for by Jared, but a point was made to make sure this was a fundraising effort as well. In the end, St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital was chosen as the fundraising candidate, and to date have raised more than $240 million. To cap it all off, the crew had a successful launch on September 15th and enjoyed their multi-day journey in low Earth orbit before a successful recovery days later. If you want to learn more about the mission and its crew, check out my video on Inspiration 4, linked somewhere. Future me will figure that out. And of course, you can still donate to the cause as well. There will be a link down in the description where you can go find it. This year, we've seen a lot of work being done in low Earth orbit. The ISS has seen new upgrades with its new complement of IROSA solar arrays that were flown up on a Cargo Dragon resupply mission. The Russian Pirs module was also removed this year before the docking of the new Russian science module called Nauka. Nauka has had a troubled past, and everyone was happy to see it finally reach the orbital outpost on July 29th. However, the module ended up creating some trouble for the space station's crew as its thrusters accidentally fired due to a software issue once it was docked. Luckily, Mission Control was quickly able to handle the situation, with the crew being safe. However, the trouble didn't end there. In October, a Soyuz spacecraft accidentally fired its thrusters as well, sending the station yet into another spin. Once again, the issue was mitigated, and now every time I see a Russian spacecraft approach the station, I pray there isn't another thruster issue. I'm tired about talking about Russian modules, so let's move on. We saw a new space station enter the game this year as well, with China's Tiangong space station being launched in late April. 2021 was also a big year for interplanetary missions. On February 18th, the Perseverance rover finally touched down on the Martian surface to begin its mission of searching for ancient microbial life. The rover also carried a special passenger with it to Mars, which is the Ingenuity helicopter. To date, it has flown nearly 20 flights, far more than the goal of just achieving power-controlled flight on another planet. The United Arab Emirates also joined in on the fun, with its first successful Mars mission placing a spacecraft in orbit around the Red Planet. China also couldn't be left out either and also landed its Young rover on Mars. Later into the year, we saw the launch of Lucy. The spacecraft named after the Lucy fossil is going to be the first spacecraft to visit the Trojan asteroids to investigate the early days of our solar system. Following the launch of Lucy, we saw DART take to the skies. DART is NASA's Double Asteroid Redirection Test, and its first planetary defense mission. The DART spacecraft will crash into Dimorphos, an asteroid that orbits around the asteroid Didymos. Then we have the launch of IXPE, or Imaging X-ray Polarimetry Explorer, with its goal to measure the polarization of X-rays in our universe. And finally, we have the long-awaited launch of the James Webb Telescope. After years of anticipation, JWST was launched Christmas morning and is currently en route to its final destination at the L2 Earth-Sun Lagrange point. This high-power telescope will replace the Hubble telescope that has been in service since 1990. Unfortunately, we've had some major controversy this year in spaceflight. First off was the Blue Origin lawsuit against NASA for their choice of SpaceX for the Human Landing System, or HLS contract, for the upcoming moon landings as part of the Artemis program. The lawsuit started in August and dragged on for about a month, which delayed any progress on the HLS contract. Another point of controversy was China's out-of-control booster. The booster in question was China's Long March 5B, which carried the first module of the Tiangong space station to orbit. Due to the nature of the mission, the booster had an uncontrollable re-entry, which sparked international controversy on the topic. Of course, there are more controversial spaceflight topics to go into, but let's put that aside for some positivity, shall we? This year, we saw some new and old faces enter the market. On November 20th, Astra finally achieved orbit after 3 other failed launches, including a quite stylish electric slide at the 3rd attempt. Firefly also debuted its new Firefly Alpha rocket. Unfortunately, it didn't reach orbit as one of the first stage engines had a premature shutdown, leading to an unstable breakup of the vehicle when it reached supersonic speeds. South Korea also saw a similar fate with its first in-house rocket called Nuri. The vehicle was placed into orbit, but the 3rd stage saw a quicker burn than expected, leading to the orbit not being the correct parameters. However, these failures aren't terrible. They're great stepping stones for both the parties, and I have the confidence that the next flights of both the Firefly Alpha and the Nuri will be more successful. Relativity Space also showed some progress this year on their 3D printed rocket dubbed Terran 1. More testing was conducted this year for an expected launch sometime in 2022. And that's it. These are the highlights of spaceflight in 2021. It has been an amazing year, and we have so many missions and launches to look forward to in 2022. Comment below what spaceflight event you're looking forward to next year, or what your favorite was this year. I think the launch of SN15 or the inaugural launch of Firefly Alpha was my favorite, but SN9 falling over into the high bay was pretty close second. This channel has also grown so much this year, and since August, I've already had my first ever video reach 1K views, so thank you so much for that, and I'm anticipating an amazing 2022. Maybe that Starship video will finally be out too. Other than that, thank you so much for the continued support this year. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and like and share this video, as well as spreading the word about the channel. Happy New Year! I'm the Space Centric, breaking down complex things for everyday people.